Hello, everybody. I'm going to do a video today about New Year's resolutions, well, about willpower. And what we're talking about here, this is coming from my vein of I want to do X, but it feels like there's a part of me which disagrees. And there's a part of me which is kind of drawing me back in the other direction. Okay. That's the willpower that I'm talking about, let's say. So the first thing that you need to understand about this is that we actually have a limited supply of willpower. Imagine willpower like in a glass bottle or in a cup, okay? And you fill it up with glucose, with sleep, with a clean, healthy environment, with energy and with peace, okay? And then you deplete it with any decision that you're making, the work that you're doing, the distractions that you make for yourself, driving in your car, the activities that you do, the times that you try to control your thoughts, control your emotions, avoid your impulses, anything that you are trying to persevere at in your actions, that all depletes it. So imagine that over the course of a day, you have a pot of willpower that you can use how you choose to use. But every single time that you make a decision, it's dropping down. What that means is, for example, since it's New Year, this is why dieting is so hard, because you're trying to use your will to stop you eating so much, but that is depleting your glucose, which is actually the supply of the willpower that you need. Okay, so that's why it's a complicated subject, willpower. But you must, if you're going to make choices, if you're going to make goals, I say you must, it's difficult to say you must, but try as hard as you can to act upon them and close the loops. Okay, what I mean is, I've spoken on one of the other videos, there is nothing as fatiguing as an uncompleted task. Your brain gets wrapped around ideas that are not implemented, that are not closed out. Okay, we're a goal-driven brain. So if things are not completed, they stay in your mind. That's one of the reasons why to-do lists are kind of useful. Okay, I'm not really a big fan of to-do lists per se, but what they are fantastic for is creating the ability to drop things out of your mind. So if you can use a to-do list as a way of writing your objectives down in a manner that you are absolutely sure you're going to refer to, that are going to remind you to do something, then you no longer need to think about it all the time. Okay, the idea is to get rid of these open loops in your head. Similarly, if you've got stress and things, obsessions, thoughts that are going through your mind, this is constantly depleting your willpower. So tidy mind, a tidy, well-fed, well-rested body, a tidy environment as well. Your mind can't cope with many messes at the same time. So if you are existing in a messy environment, it's far less likely that you're going to have a creative temperament, because your brain can't cope with too many messes at the same time, and creativity is a messy business. So these are all kind of circumstantial elements that it might be useful to contemplate when you're using your willpower. Okay, so the end conclusion is, don't have too many goals for a start. Don't get overwhelmed by too many challenges at the same time, because that'll create stress. That will create overwhelm. It'll deplete this willpower. So you end up doing nothing. You end up in a sort of a noisy state. Only have one New Year resolution if you choose to have any New Year resolutions. Okay, so that's all kind of background information that it might be useful to contemplate. Okay, then, given that willpower is mainly to be used for emergencies as much as possible, what do you do instead? You create habits. So the best way to stop needing will for something which is uncustomary is to make it customary. So you create habits. Okay. Practice drives changes in behavior. Most habits apparently take about 30 days. So you only need about 30 days of doing something to habituate it. And it doesn't really, well, I guess it does matter what you choose to habituate, but the act of habituating anything is exercising that muscle. So you get better at habituating other things. Just the idea of kind of sitting up straight, of speaking precisely and not saying ums and ahs, of, if you go on a diet, of weighing yourself every day. Okay. People say, no, 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 don't weigh yourself every day. It's a noisy indicator. It's gonna send you off track. And it's true, it's a noisy indicator, but you can build that into your observations. So you can use it as a noisy indicator and only follow the trend rather than the minutiae of every number on the scale. But the act of weighing yourself every day creates a habit, especially if you do it first thing in the morning, which is reminding you every day of the goal that you are going towards. Very, very useful. Okay. Similarly, evaluating yourself, if you can self-evaluate, if you can journal every evening, all these ideas that become habituated, well, then they no longer need your will. They're just a part of you. And that's really, really useful, because then it releases your willpower for the things that are kind of tough and new. So when we're talking about willpower, I think what we're talking about more is impulse control. Okay. So you want to do X. Part of you, for whatever reason, thinks it's too much effort, or you might get it wrong, or you might look silly. There's 1,001 reasons why it's probably better that we postpone this to a future date. And then you find something more interesting to do instead. You follow an impulse. Okay. And we're all brilliant at this, right? This is the definition of procrastination, Or let me look at Facebook or something nonsensical like that. More than that, okay, we set our goals, we set our intentions when we're kind of contemplative, we're kind of thoughtful, we're going, well, yes, this would be good, and this would be good, okay? When we are triggered or we're caught by our impulses, we're not in that calm state. We're in a sort of a slightly het up state, right? There's something has grabbed our attention. So it's doubly hard at that point to then go back to the calm, pensive, willpower approach. So how can you anticipate in advance, plan for the attacks of impulses that are going to get in the way of what is ostensibly your goal, your will? Okay. Number one is cut yourself some slack and accept that this is part of being human. It's going to occur. So therefore, anticipate it. Okay. People fall over, right? If you're doing a diet, which I don't recommend at all, but if you're doing a diet, you're going to fall off the wagon, right? It's just what happens. When you learn to walk, you fall. It's okay. It goes with the territory. The way to anticipate and stop following impulses which are contrary to your goals is to set up your environment in advance in full awareness of where they're going to come from, so that they're not there. Okay. So if you're a gambler and you don't want to gamble, well, you're not going to go to the casino. Yeah, as a simple example, you go to the casino, you are placing yourself in a position where your impulses are likely to be triggered. So let's assume that we're not all strong enough to manage our impulses. just don't go to the casino in the first place. Okay. Don't even look at the casino. That's sort of an idea. Publicly bind yourself in some way to your goal. State what it is. Tell your friends. Put it on a video and put it out, right? Tell people. We are influenced so much by our peer group that if you tell people what it is that you're going to do, then by a combination of carrot and stick, you're far, far more likely to maintain that goal than to give up on it, because that would involve kind of public regret, humiliation, embarrassment, something like that. So bind yourself. I love this idea of kind of publicly stating it yourself. If you can get a point where you are able to create the habits that support your goal, it's a sort of a virtuous circle. You feel better about it. You feel healthier. You feel a sense of achievement. That reinforces your willpower. You see the fruits of your endeavors. It motivates you. Yeah. So the way to do that is by not biting off too much in one go. Okay. The way that you do this is by, you eat an elephant chunk at a time. You don't eat it in one go. So if you can find ways to integrate, what I'm basically saying is healthier habits, better habits, supportive habits that will direct you towards your goal through your habit rather than through your will, that can be very, very useful. But the one I find the most useful is transcending your personal will by accessing higher goals. So if you can find magical reasons why, which go beyond yourself, that make you feel as though you're part of something larger than yourself, well, then your goal becomes a mission. Okay. If you can bring a sense of humility, of almost powerlessness to yourself, but that your goal is driven by a need which is greater than you, then you are onto a massive winner, because then you've got your imagination on the same side as your will. And that's when you become like a steam train. Okay. So it can be, I must control my impulses because that allows me to do XYZ, which I am doing for the greater good of other people. Okay. That is so motivating. It's far, far more motivating in actual fact than doing XYZ because, it's going to give you a sense of well-being 6 months down the line, something like that. So the idea of kind of surrendering to a higher force and accepting your weakness paradoxically ends up kind of strengthening you. So that's another way of looking at it. There are many, many other little tools that you can use. If we continue on this idea of impulse control, if you find yourself being dragged off track, if there is an impulse that you want to do, rather than saying, no, I will not do that, I will focus on my goal, right? Instead, try postponing the pleasure. Yes, I'll do it, but not today. Yes, I'll do it, but in a few days' time. Right now, I'm going to focus on what it is that I'm doing, and I'll do that later. Yeah, because by the time later comes, the likelihood is that that impulse is gone, disappeared. Yeah, so that's another way. What we're talking about here is giving yourself ways of not making a mess of the goal that you want to do. Yeah. So basically, self-control is more about not mucking up, not raising your stress levels because you've disappointed yourself, and rebuilding that back into self-control. So the whole thing is, as I say, it's a virtuous circle. The end result is that the most successful people don't tend to use self-control as a method of sort of firefighting, okay, of last defense. Instead, what they're doing is they are habituating this within the parameters of the day-to-day life, the day-to-day motivation. They are seeking out their kind of higher calling, using that to motivate themselves so that they've got a gleaming, gorgeous, glorious reason why. I think that's all I'll say on this. Yeah. So if you're struggling with New Year's resolutions, just have a look through, find out if there's too many of them, whittle them down, chunk it down, allow yourself to see small, regular successes. That's very motivating, rather than setting yourself up with a big hurdle, and kind of cut yourself some slack. Yeah. All right. Thanks for watching. Cheers. Bye.